Good, thank you. How are you?
Not bad. Can't complain. It's been a long day so far, but hey, it's been a good one.
I'm just waking up over here in New York. So all good so far.
Yes, I'm waking up.
Deepak, where are you? I know you're always traveling around the place. So
Today I'm logging in from the sunny Canaries, but I will be in the north of Spain towards the end of the week. So excited to see what the north of Spain holds in store. And yeah, looking forward to taking some time off over the next couple of days.
nice.
Cool. I suppose we can get going. So hi everyone, welcome to this webinar by Dealfront. Cold calls are dead. Cold emails are dead as well. We see countless posts stating the same on LinkedIn and social. And today's star-studded cast of panelists will hopefully unravel how they make cold outreach work today for them and their teams. Before I hand it over to them to introduce themselves, I'd like to remind you all that everybody who's tuning in, that today's webinar is what you make of it. So ask any questions you have in the comments and we'll get through them throughout the webinar. So without further ado, who wants to go first? Elric, I'll pick on you.
Yeah, sure. So, hey, I'm Eric. So right now I just started a new role at Agorapulse as their SDR team leader. So I'm here to build the SDR function. So it's mainly PLG, but also the goal also is to build the outbound function. And on top of that, I have a newsletter and a podcast for SDRs.
Awesome. Let's go with Michael.
Thanks, Deepak. Yeah, Michael Hansen, based in London, and run a sales enablement consultancy called Growth Genie that helps salespeople have better conversations. I guess what that means, the stat I always like to say is 18% of buyers hate salespeople, and I think that's because salespeople send a lot of rubbish, right? I think all of us have been receivers of spam on email and bad cold calls, so our job is to help salespeople be better and actually be seen not as salespeople but advisors that are trying to help their customers.
Awesome. Good to have you on board. Bethany, over to you.
Hey, I'm Bethany. I'm the co-founder and CEO of SendSpark, which is a video messaging platform. You can think of it kind of like Loom or Vidyard, but with a lot more built in to help you create personalized videos at scale to use for cold outreach or other types of email customer communication.
Awesome. And last but not least, my colleague, Stuart.
Cool, thanks, Deepak. Yeah, so I'm Stuart Moss. I lead the SDR function at Dealfront. I've always worked in the lead generation, pipeline generation remit for pretty much all of my career. I won't age myself, but that's pretty much where I spent the entire career. Yeah, and so I'm here to build and scale our pipeline machine at Dealfront.
Awesome. Well, thank you all very much for taking part in today's webinar. I guess we can get going with some of the questions that we've curated from some of our audience. And the first one that we have here is, what are the key components of a successful cold outreach strategy in B2B?
I think one of the first things is the list that you're targeting, because I feel like often people do a bit of a spray and pray approach, which is like, we're going to target everyone. Whereas what we say is you need to be very specific with your list. So there's kind of like three things I look for with who you're targeting, which is obviously first is job title. That's kind of the most obvious. But say it was just to target marketing leaders. Every marketing lead is different. So you also want to look at the industry, which is what type of vertical is it? Is it software, fintech, manufacturing, whatever it is? And then the last thing is what we call trigger events, which is like, what are some of the things happening at all the people I'm targeting? So in our case, it could be hiring salespeople. In Dealfront's case, it could be they've got, over 100,000 website views or something like that. So we always say, like, often you go wrong at the first hurdle because you're like, your net is too wide, whereas you want to target a very specific audience. That's normally the first thing I'd look at.
And to chime on that, like, this is similar to the trigger events, but one thing that's really important is like, how do you show relevance, whether it's something like new that occurred, like a specific event, or just relevance to what you think they're doing, going through, how they're similar to your customer persona. but you really have to show like why it's important in like the first like glimpse of the email and why it's relevant to them, or it's just going to get deleted.
So for me, I think there is like 3 key components for that. So the first thing is the SCP, then the buyer personas, and then the messaging. So I think that's, if you don't have that, obviously you can't have like a successful outreach strategy. So when I say SCP, for example, there is a couple things to understand. So the firmographic and demographics of your customers. I think they are the most important. You want to, like we already said, but understand the industry, the size of the company, because a company with 50 employees and a company with 5,000 employees, they won't have the same set challenges, and you want to understand that. And then the buyer personas, you want to understand the pains that your product is solving for them before thinking about your messaging, because if you don't know those pains, for me, you can't be successful in your outreach, because you don't understand your personas, and your messaging won't be relevant. And then the messaging based on the ICP, the industry, or the buyer personas, you should have like a specific messaging for, I don't know, a VP of data in the SaaS industry. Your messaging would be different than a VP of data in the retail industry, for example. So that's, what's important for me in a successful call outreach strategy.
I think to add to that, well, I don't know if I can add to that, but I think outside of all of the things that got mentioned there, one of the things I always try and teach my team, not just about know who you're targeting, have the right list put together and things like that, but it's also just knowing what other people are doing, and more often than not doing the exact opposite. And that might sound odd, or like that's a huge cumbersome task, but actually the majority of cold outreach is so painfully bad that you don't have to do that much to be different. What it does mean though is spending that little bit extra time to truly understand your prospect and what they might care about, so that in your cold outreach strategy it can incorporate all of that knowledge to cut through the noise and pique their interest. I think most of the battle is just getting noticed, so that you have a long enough to say what you want to say. And so it's cutting through the noise and piquing interest quickly. And you can do that just by being slightly different from other people.
I'd like to touch on a point that Bethany made on personalization. I just wanted to ask you all, what role does personalization play, if any, in your cold outreach? And how do you balance it with that relevance? And if so, can you scale this effectively? And if you're currently doing it, would you mind sharing how you're doing it within your teams?
I guess I can go first, since I brought it up. I think that there's a lot of things that people think are personalized, and sometimes they're so bad it's funny. Like I got a bunch of emails like all the same week that were clearly written by ChatGPT that was like such superficial personalization, telling me what SendSpark did. And I'm like, dude, I know what SendSpark did. You don't have to use AI to like tell me my company back to me. It's not relevant. It doesn't like touch on a need. It doesn't even tell me what you do. So, I think you need to find this personalization that's really relevant to your customer. And you also don't have to be afraid to pitch your product. Like that's what you're reaching out for. But the key thing is like going back to that basic of who is your ideal customer persona? Like what is their problem and how do you solve that? And if you're really like touching on their problem in a way that maybe isn't even unique to them, because all of your ICPs have the same problem, it could still be really relevant and valuable. And that's really what you're trying to do. And I think that, it just goes back to being like super direct. Don't like over optimize, but just try to really touch on that key thing. And then it is scalable. Whether like we of course do a lot of videos, but like a misconception with video as well is that you have to do a personalized video for every person. And it's like, you don't. Like if you're able to show that pain, one video, maybe with some custom variables, is going to go a long way, and it's infinitely scalable.
Yeah, I think you said 2 different words there, Deepak, which was like personalization and relevance. And I think as Bethany was saying, there's a lot of like crap personalization, whether it's ChatGPT or someone goes on and says, "Hey, I noticed you went to this university," and it's just like they do that just for the sake of it, and then there's a huge like pitch afterwards, right? So you've basically just taken the time to write one line, and then you just copied and pasted something, and there's no thread through it. So I think that's also something I would advise listeners is you're trying to create a story in your email, LinkedIn, cold call, whatever it is. There's got to be like a thread throughout it. And I think I actually say going back to relevancy personalization, because you're trying to sell to a business. I actually think when you're doing the customization, it's better that it's like business research versus like about the person, because you're trying to have a business conversation at the end of the day. So what you can do if you're a manager or even someone doing the work is work out what are some of those triggers I was talking about earlier. So like these are things that are happening at most of the companies. So in our case, it's like hiring salespeople, using a particular piece of technology, just they're new in their job, right? So you want to try and like map out that when you're trying to do this research, what are some of the things you look for? So it's not going to take you like 20 minutes per person. It can take you like 5 minutes.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's kind of 3 layers that I get my team to look at. So it's I guess a combination of both of those things that both Bethany and Michael have mentioned there. So we will start with at Dealfront, we will start with a more personal thing. And if that is hard or we can't find that, then we'll drop down to more of a business or just making assumptions about their role based on, typically people in your position have this kind of problem. We lean quite heavily into what I would say is hyper personalization. And the way that we do it is effectively, if we know something about you, I don't know, let's say you like tennis, then we would start with a subject line that mentions tennis somehow, and we talk about tennis, but link that back to Dealfront. So the creativity comes in the connection between tennis and what we can offer. And that's where the SDRs are able to be creative, because our proposition doesn't change. It's that just how you connect those dots together. So that's where the SDRs here will spend their time.
On my side, I think I adapt my strategy depending on the size of the company I'm going after. So the company I used to work for earlier this year, I was prospecting enterprise accounts, but before that I was focusing on mid-market accounts, and so my strategy will be different. Mid-market accounts more focused on the industry and the buyer personas. And if I can find something about my prospect, I will add some personalization or something being relevant about them that I found about them. Earlier this year, I worked for a company working with data leaders. So there are people who are not active on LinkedIn. So even though I was thinking about, hey, how can I personalize my outreach? It's a waste of time, because 95% of my prospects, you won't find anything about them on their profile. So instead of that, I was personalizing my outreach based on the business. So there are enterprise accounts. So generally, you might have one person, one VP, one director who is being on the show, on podcast. And then I leverage the information found from this to reach out to the rest of the team. So it's relevant to the business because that's the VP or the director talking about a specific problem that they're facing. And so I can contact the rest of the team because that's the common challenge for the company. So that's how I'm thinking about that, because depending on your buyer personas, some buyer personas are more active on LinkedIn, so it's easier to find things that you can personalize. But if you can't, I think it's more quick to focus on the business problems instead of the prospect.
Thank you. And I just have a 2-part question moving on from some of the stuff that was mentioned now. So if we look at kind of how the landscape has changed when it comes to cold outreach, how do you think it's evolved over the last couple of years? And since Bethany mentioned ChatGPT, I'm wondering, what's in store with the rise of AI for sales teams?
I think the rise of ChatGPT and generative AI is an interesting one. I think it was Bethany that said earlier, it's so super obvious when someone's used it to write, something to you, because it is just formatted in a certain way, or it just writes things in certain ways that it's super obvious. I do though think that you can drive a lot of efficiency by using it. So you could literally go to it and say, write me an email to a sales manager who likes tennis in that example, and it will write you something. Now, I wouldn't implore anyone sends that thing because it's going to be horrible, but it might have something in there that sparks some creativity for you. It'll write something about serving up aces for you, but it will also connect the dots of what a sales manager cares about back to tennis.
Yeah.
You can just take little bits out of that resonate and word them better, word them yourself, or write around them to create something pretty cool very quickly. When people just use ChatGPT and copy and paste and send, it's awful, and I think people are going to do more damage than good with it if they leverage it that way.
Yeah, I think there was already a lot of spam, as I mentioned kind of in my intro. I think 3-4 years ago, due to the rise of like automation tools on email, but it was more just to like, you'd still have to write the copy yourself, whereas now you've got ChatGPT. So I think we're going to see even more spam than ever before. And I think salespeople can look at this in two ways. One could be like, oh, sales is harder than ever, right? Because I've got to break through all this noise. Or you can say there's so much junk, actually, it's quite easy to stand out. And I think I agree with what Stuart said around, I don't think ChatGPT is necessarily a bad thing. It's like how you use it. Because if you just say, hey, write me a whole email, I'm targeting this person, write me an email, it's probably not going to be very good. But if you break down the email, like, hey, what's happening at this company in like the last 3 months, like what's the pain point for this persona, this vertical, and then you bring in your own knowledge of your own company, then I think it can work well. So it's like anything, it's like, how do we use these tools to our advantage and make us more efficient and be more human versus actually just replace it? Because I think the people who at the moment are just doing the copy and paste emails, they're the ones that eventually there's not going to be a job for them because of things like ChatGPT.
And I'll echo that sentiment too, right? Like when you get the copy and paste blurbs, it's obvious, but if you take a step back, like if you're just using it to like replace what you're already doing, you're not actually changing anything. You're just doing the same thing and trying to be lazy about it. But I think that it's going to reshape a lot of things. Like I was just talking to a company yesterday that changed the way I think about some stuff. They're using generative AI to basically help you get more information about your prospects from their website pages. So the example they gave me is one of their customers sells like a platform to help you build integrations. And so they could use this generative AI company to see what integrations their prospects already have very easily and source really good high quality leads that are super relevant. And it's like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And, you're still writing the same emails because I don't think the personalization comes from rephrasing a sentence in an email, it comes from being relevant, right? And so if you're able to basically like access all this information on the web really quickly and ask the right questions and get really efficient answers, like no longer are you just, filtering your list based on like job title, profile, company size, location, those things we've been using for years. It opens up infinite doors. And it helps you like spark more creativity for how to use it. So I think a lot's going to change. And I think it actually is going to be better. Like right now we're seeing a lot more like spam is, and it's not relevant. But I think the cool thing is it actually unlocks the ability to be more relevant. But people still have to figure out how to use it in the right way.
Yeah, so if you talk about AI, specifically ChatGPT for me, so I use it in different ways. So I use it for mainly this year and for enterprise accounts. So I use it one for creating ACPs, then understanding my buyer personas, because for me this year I was working with data leaders and it was new for me, coming from selling to CFOs, CMOs, coming to the world of data and engineers. It was hard, I would say, in the sense that moving from understanding the ecosystem of sales or CFOs, but then moving to the data cloud was a challenge for me. So I used ChatGPT to understand quicker my buyer personas. So that's one. And then also to research my accounts, because like I mentioned earlier, enterprise accounts, if I could find like a podcast interview, if I can find the transcript of the interview, I was going to use ChatGPT to help me find the key challenges or initiatives from the company inside this transcript and map that to what we were selling and the problems that we can solve. So that's one. But then I use it also, for example, I was working with for prospecting gaming companies, and same here, I was using, hey, how can I match data with, I don't know, a video game, for example, League of Legends or World of Warcraft, was making the comparison of both. And I think ChatGPT, even though email was not perfect, it gave you like some ideas on how you can write the email. So
lots of good points there. So from what I can gather, I guess the general consensus is to use it for gathering those insights, conducting research, to use it as a foundation to help you in your outreach, but not replace it entirely, not use whatever you're getting through AI word by word, but essentially help you kind of get the grunt work out the way so you can focus and spend more time on the activities that really matter, that are going to help you move the needle forward. I guess that's a way to summarize this. And when you are conducting those follow-ups and spreading them out, how do you then strike a balance between persistence and not coming across as too pushy?
I think that comes into messaging, right? So going back to what we were saying before, if you're just copy and pasting a load of stuff, then it's not going to be good. I think going back to, I think one of the things Bethany said earlier, you don't always have to like personalize every single message, but I think there should be a combination of personalized steps and like follow-ups, so like automated messages. So like bump messages are ones that get a lot of hate, but like our data shows they work often. As an example, say like LinkedIn voice notes, we see as something that's very effective, but often actually the majority of replies we see come on the follow-up. So you'll send like a very personalized voice note using some of the research we talked about earlier, and then we'll just send like a one line saying any feedback here on the audio note Deepak, if I was to target you. And then often people will come back and say, oh, this isn't relevant for me, or oh, sorry, I was busy, yeah, let's have a meeting. So I think it's that mixing in the personalized steps, but not necessarily having to personalize everything, and just having that follow-up process is really key.
I would agree with that. One thing I'll also add is like, see if you can, like, you should definitely do that. Another thing, in addition, if you have time and time's valuable, is see if you can remind them you exist in a valuable way, or like value driving way, where like a big thing we do at SunSpark is just like comment on people's LinkedIn posts. You know, you're kind of like reminding them you exist, but you're doing it in a way that like people want comments on their posts. And so just kind of being there, or you're being at conferences, meeting people in person, like there's other ways to kind of stay relevant. It's kind of different. It just complements the follow-up strategy you might already have.
Yeah, I'll just add to what Bethany said as well, that something you can do is like offer something that's totally unrelated to your business. So for example, in our case, if I know someone I'm targeting is like hiring SDRs or A's, even though we're not a recruitment agency, I'll be, oh, by the way, I've just posted your job posting in a few Slack forums I'm in with hundreds of salespeople. It's not me trying to sell to them, right? But it's just like, hey, I'm just trying to be helpful. Like, so, you know, so it's again being seen as that helpful person, as Beth said, like providing the value versus just like being a pesky salesperson.
Yeah, I guess if I've got anything to add to that, it would just be that, you know, follow-up emails don't necessarily just have to be like, hey, I'm here, I'm alive, please reply, because as the others have said, you're not really adding any value at that point. But you can use them to like add further context or answer different questions that they might have, and just continue to make those deposits of value until there's a chance to ask for a withdrawal from them. And so if you can just build upon what you're saying, or just add different pain points that they might have, so that there's different things for them to think about throughout your sequence or cadence or whatever you're using to do your outbound. I think that has a better result as well, like not asking for anything at all. The only other thing I would add on top of that is just like call to actions. Personally, I don't think they should be like, do you have 15 minutes next Wednesday, and just continually asking that, because most decision makers are so bored of hearing that it's just a put off straight away. I believe more in like a call to a conversation. So just something very conversational that asks a question, just to engage them. Because again, that's half of what you're just trying to achieve, is just start a conversation. And so I think just opening up with a question that will entice them into a response. Cool, now I'm just talking to you.
Yeah, so for me, I love follow-ups, and I've seen in the past a lot of bad follow-ups, like any thought, for example, and I hate this one. Because if your first email was bad, generally the feedback you will get from many thoughts, it's my fault, unsubscribe. And I've seen that a couple of times. But I think there is two ways I'm thinking about follow-ups. So one is education, and the other one is more like being funny, depending on your buyer personas, if they are young. When I say funny, for example, you can think about memes or GIFs that you can send through emails or through LinkedIn. And when I worked at Chili Piper a year ago, I was using that a lot with my prospects, and it worked really well on LinkedIn and emails. With data leaders, for example, when I was reaching out to enterprise C-level executives, that I'm not going to use memes with them, for example. I'm more into educational content. And how I'm thinking about that, there is two types of content I'm sharing. Generally, it's the content we are creating as a company. And generally, that's the content that we know are converting into pipelines. So that's one. And the other one is third-party content. So meaning that if I know we have a thought leader talking about a specific pain we're solving, I'm going to use that also, because here I'm not pitching, because generally the content we are producing, it's biased because obviously if your content is here to help them find the solution. But if you have a thought leader saying the same thing, I think it's key. And I have an example at Chili Piper. I was using a lot the podcast of Chris Walker, the CEO of Refine Labs, and there is some episode where he's talking about what Chili Piper does without mentioning Chili Piper, and that was great because I don't remember exactly how many Ds, but I've sourced like 6 or 7 Ds just by this follow-up email, for example.
Nicely done. When it comes to compliance and ethics in cold outreach, there's a lot of noise you hear on LinkedIn, particularly in Europe with GDPR. What are some of your best practices, I guess, to try and overcome this or stay in line with being compliant and ensuring that your messaging is ethical?
I think some of the things you talked about already are related to this, because there's a thing in GDPR that says legitimate business interest, which is why GDPR is a lot more to go against like B2C companies, like who are selling to individuals, like say like a Facebook or Google, like how they're using your data, versus like B2B companies. So imagine a lot of the people that are listening to this are selling to businesses. And with that legitimate business interest, again, if you're just spamming people and sending like copy and paste templates or like a generic chat GPT, you could argue, hey, there's not like legitimate business interest. Whereas actually, if you've taken the time to research and say, hey, I understand your company and what you're doing, and these are the things that are happening, this is how we can help, then it's more difficult to say there's no legitimate business interest. I think when GDPR first came out, everyone was like panicking like crazy, if anyone was selling to Europe. But I think over time, from what I've seen, there's not huge amounts of cases in the world of B2B. It's a little bit more B2C. But yeah, if you are worried about GDPR, I think it's, again, like a lot of things we talked about with like relevance, they're going to help you, not get in trouble in terms of GDPR.
Anyone add anything differently or in addition to that?
I think it's also worth knowing the rules of the country that you're targeting. So certainly in Europe, as an example, a lot of places are covered under GDPR, but there are also certain nuances in different countries where the rules are slightly different, or they just have other laws that apply. And that means the penalties vary massively as well. Places like Germany have completely different rules. They have their own version of GDPR, which I won't try and pronounce because I'd embarrass us all. But it's you need to know the country and the region that you're working in, and making sure that you're staying compliant to those rules, because as Michael quite rightly says, there are certain things that, like legitimate interest, that everyone kind of just naturally feels safe under. But if you're targeting completely off and you're just sending spam out to everyone, then you're still at risk. So you need to know the countries and what the real laws are and what applies.
I'll touch on the ethics piece of this. I think it should go without saying you want to be very honest in your emails. But I get a lot of ones that aren't, and it's like you might if you're optimized too much to get a meeting or get a conversion, you might be tempted to pretend that you're replying, or mention someone's coworker as referral, but you didn't really talk to them, or say your manager, like this one I get all the time, like, oh, my manager asked me to reach out. And it's like, okay, your manager sent you a list. Like, I know that. And, with SendSpark, we let people do auto personalized videos. And I often have to tell people, don't pretend that you made this video. Don't be like, hey, first name, I made this video just for you, because you didn't. And like, it never pays to be unethical. Like, you can be relevant without pretending you made a video for them and just be like, hey, I think this is relevant for you, blah, blah, blah. But it's all about like being open and honest, because like, if you're unethical, like, people are going to immediately put a guard up and push you away. And maybe you'll get that click, you'll get that reply, you'll get the meeting, but your relationship's dead after that. So think about the long game.
Totally. I think you get that short-term gratification, but at some point it will backfire, right?
Yeah.
So over to you, Eric. Do you want to add anything else?
Yeah, so if you talk about being compliant, we call emails. Generally, that's something I'm thinking about, but if we are relevant, generally that's not something, we don't get like a lot of bad feedback about it because it's relevant to the business or you've done some research. But even though you do that, sometimes you have prospects who are annoyed by prospecting in general. So they are threatening you that they're going to sue you. But here, those prospects, obviously, you want to be removing them from your CRM, from your list, and making sure they're not getting anything from you. So other than that, so that's what I've seen so far.
And when it comes to the metrics or the key data points that you track when you're measuring the success of a certain campaign, what are some of the things that you look out for or keep in mind? Should we go with Stuart first?
Yeah, happy to. So there's some more obvious ones like open rate, reply rates, click rates, bounce rates, total calls, calls to connect. So I think, there's the kind of high level, just kind of input type ones and what connections you're getting and reply rates, etc. The ones I personally like to focus on are more efficiency within those things. So you could be getting an 80% reply rate, but if every reply is literally telling you to go away and they never want to speak to you again, that's not a good place to be. Equally, just loads of people opening your email doesn't really mean anything if no one ever replies to you. And so, and when it comes to the calling side, if you get loads of connected calls, amazing. But if, again, everyone just hangs up, not good data to track. So I like to look at like, where are people getting stuck in the phone calls that connect? Are they getting rejected right at the beginning? Are they getting rejected when they're trying to close? Like, where in the call are they stuck? Because that helps inform coaching for me as a leader. I can help understand each individual rep, but also for individual reps, they can understand where they need to develop themselves and start changing things, testing their messaging. So I tend to look at the efficiency type stats within things rather than just the raw numbers at the top, because that's where I think I can pull levers to get different outcomes.
I think I was going to look at it from two aspects, of like a managerial aspect and then like seller aspect. So I think managerial aspect, one of the mistakes I see sometimes is you can put off your top performers, because the way I say the target is you need to get 10 qualified opportunities a month, or if you're closing deals, X amount of revenue. If the person's doing that, then you shouldn't be like micromanaging them in a way, because you've got to let salespeople have their own creativity. So that's one side. The other side is, so we got to look at, so let's just say it's an SDR role, like meetings or opportunities is the ultimate target, but below that you have conversations, and then below that is more of that micromanagement of like number of calls, emails, etc. What I find is often missing is looking at that conversations. And to give you an example of what that is not every reply, and Stuart was talking about this, that you're going to get is two extremes, is like unsubscribe, leave me alone, or yes, let's have a meeting. Often it will be in the middle, like, hey, send me some more information. So you put that in like a conversation. You've started a conversation. And again, the same on a cold call. Let's say you call someone, but you don't book a meeting, but you have a conversation, you learn what technology they're using, what's happening at the company. That's great, because from like an account-based model, you're learning something new and maybe you can use that elsewhere. So I think that's the big metric that I see that often people aren't measuring, which is that conversations, which I think is really important as well.
So if we're thinking about the channels, I think the positive replies per channel, I think it's super important. But then also on top of that, what I'm looking at with my teams generally, it's the number of activities that you need to produce to get a meeting, for example, but a qualified meeting, because it's same here if we're talking about meetings, are they qualified? That's one, but then also the efficiency with accounts. So how many accounts you are currently working and what's your booking rate on those accounts? Same here on if they're qualified. So that's what I'm looking for, to see if we are efficient on our outreach, because like we said earlier, yes, we can optimize the open rate and stuff like that, but the most important at the end, it's the efficiency on how many activities are we producing to get qualified meetings.
Yeah. What we'll do, we look at it kind of on two levels. So we have the actual like email campaign level. And what we'll often do is, like, let's say we have 1,000 people we're going to reach out to in a group. We'll do like an A/B test with 200. So there's a sample group. And then, we'll maybe think of a couple things. We'll pick the one that has, the best, whatever it is, often a meeting, but it could also be just a reply or a sign up for a free trial in our case, because we have a platform. And so that's what we're looking for to optimize the email campaigns. And then every now and then, I'll say like once a month, more or less, we'll take like a big high level step back, and then we'll look at all of our customers, and then we'll work backwards and be like, okay, where'd they come from? What was their journey? Was it LinkedIn? Was it email? Was it this type of outreach? Was it more personalized or more automated? And then try to like revamp our strategy going forward. But I think it's interesting to hear you guys talk, because I think there's a lot in between that we can be tracking as well.
Absolutely. And this one, I guess, is a more personal question, but from all the cold outreach campaigns that you've conducted, have there been any that have not gone as planned? And can you share any lessons learned or any cautionary tales that people should watch out for?
Yeah, I can. I remember being an SDR, and we used to run this campaign where basically every email would say "I love" and then the name of the company that you were trying to prospect, and you would just have to fake your love for the brand within it and tell them exactly why you cared about their company, and then try and somehow segue that into trying to ask them for a meeting and why they'd care. And it was just the weirdest disjointed messaging that you would ever get. And although it did book the odd meeting here and there, it was just horrific, and people got they saw through the bovine scatology and just told us exactly where to go a lot of the time. So I would avoid, I think it was said earlier on, that kind of fake. Just be you and just be real, and you don't lie and make it up. We probably all get it on LinkedIn where it's like, hey, I viewed your profile but I know you didn't, because I can literally see you didn't. So just don't lie, because it does go horrifically badly, and it's very embarrassing when you get called out for
it. So one thing we've done, so we always want to run A/B tests, and like SendSpark, we're a video casting tool. So like obviously we want to send videos in our outreach, but if we were to only do that all the time, we wouldn't be able to track how much does it increase conversion rates. So what can be really funny is like when people are in the group that don't receive a video, they get really angry. They're like, you're a video prospecting tool and you didn't send me a video. Like, what's wrong? And then they take it really far. Like, you must not believe in your own, they'll go, and you're like, oh my God, like we don't, one, we just want to make sure this is still working. And, two, not every email needs to have a video all the time. So it's just funny when people try to like poke holes in your things and yell at you for all kinds of reasons, but it's fine. We'll just send more videos.
He considered replying back with, can I not have video fatigue for once? Over to you, Michael.
Yeah, I was going to add, I think for me, I used to make assumptions. So Lavender's got quite good data around this of if you use non-assumptive language in emails, you get much higher response rate. So what that means is, let's go back to personalization, right? So I see a company is hiring salespeople. So I put in my opening line, hey, I saw Dealfront is hiring A's, SDRs, CSMs, whatever it is. But sometimes with that example, what's on the internet is not always true because they put up the job post 3 months ago and they forgot to take it down or whatever. So language is like seems you're hiring salespeople. So that's one. And this is something I battled with because if you're doing cold outreach with a person or a company you've never spoken to anyone at that company, you kind of do have to make an assumption because like, I've never spoken to anyone in this company, so I've got to try and assume some type of pain point. But it's the language that you lose. Seems this may be a pain point for you based on other conversations I've had with similar people, but I'm not sure. So like coming from that place of humility, like I think this may be a pain, but I'm not sure is helpful.
So for me, I've learned 2 things this year with Core Outreach. One is the outreach on LinkedIn. So generally, I've seen that if you are going after, on LinkedIn, you can read a lot of people saying you should pitch lab on LinkedIn. I think it depends when you can do it and when you can't. So if you're prospect active on LinkedIn, that's not something I recommend. And that's something I was never doing with, for example, Chili Pepper with sales leaders or marketing leaders. But this year I was prospecting people who are not active on LinkedIn. And here that's something you want to think about because I have a prospect, for example, that book a meeting with, for example, in June. He said yes to the meeting and then ghosted me for months. And then a month after, so he get back to me, say, oh, sorry, I didn't go on LinkedIn this past month. So yeah, let's do this meeting. So because data leaders are not spending time on LinkedIn. So here I think you can pitch, but obviously not the same message to everyone, but you can be obviously personal to your prospects because some buyer personnel are not active on LinkedIn, and that's something you need to figure out. And then the second thing is I've learned that from same Lavender also, how when you find something that you can use in your outreach, so something that, for example, if they're hiring, what's the problem with that, what's the challenge with that, and then saying how you can help with that actually, because before when 2-3 years ago I was struggling with when I was finding like something that I can use in my outreach, and then how I can use that with what we are doing. But now this year I've learned how I can use a trigger and then leverage that to how we can help on this trigger.
Definitely lots of learnings and takeaways there for anyone who's listening. And I guess now on the flip side, and to finish off on a more positive note, can you share your most successful cold outreach win and how did you make it happen?
Yes, if you want, I can start because sorry, I need to jump in 3 minutes. Sorry about that. I have an internal meeting that I need to join, but I use actually ChatGPT to book this one. So that's my biggest opportunity I've sourced this year. That's Gong. I was prospecting Gong actually, and the data team at Gong, and I use an interview from one of the director of engineering where they were talking about the changes they were facing. And basically I leverage ChatGPT, and the way I'm thinking about that, so I'm going to mention what I've said earlier. I was not thinking about, hey, I'm going just to focus on this person. Actually, I have maybe 10-15 person I can contact at the account. But let's do first understand the transcript of this interview. Let's see how I can use ChatGPT to leverage that. So here that's how I'm thinking about ChatGPT, but ChatGPT, generally I use it to analyze the transcript, and I say, hey, based on this transcript, give me 5 key initiatives or challenges that my product data catalog can help with, and also say why it's relevant, but also how we can help them. Because like I mentioned earlier, I'm not an expert at data leaders, and I use that in this way. And then based on the results that ChatGPT gave me, I craft a message. I use Lavender to help me optimize the message. And then I start sending it to the person who was on the interview. And then I was basically using the same message to the rest of the executive team on the data team. And I got a positive reply, and it was my biggest opportunity. So it was like a 80K ACV opportunity. So it was a really good opportunity for us.
Nice one. Well done. I guess that just shows how you can put some of these tools into good use, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Elric, I know you need to hop off, but before you do so, how can those listening in best approach you if they have any questions or anything else on their mind that they'd potentially like to discuss with you?
LinkedIn. I think, yeah, that's the best way to reach out to me.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you very much for hopping on the call today, Elric. We'll catch up later. But
thank you. Thanks, everyone.
soon.
I'll see you later.
Hope your
Bye-bye.
call goes well. Cool. Over to Stuart.
Yeah, good question. I think one of the wins that stands out in my mind, probably the one that I remember, was breaking into Lego Group, which was a pretty cool brand to get into straight away. It was a company that the business had been struggling to break into for quite a while. So this isn't Dealfront, this is a past company. No one had really cracked it. And the way that I cracked it was I found someone who actually worked in a slightly strange department where they worked in a creative department, but on very niche specific projects. At the time, I just so happened to be playing a game a lot with my son because he wanted it so desperately. And it was a game called Lego Worlds, which is a bit like Minecraft, but for Lego, essentially. And so I just wrote to them and basically said, hey, looks like you were part of the creative team that helped build this and bring it to life. Look, just want to kind of say thank you, really. Like, this has genuinely impacted my world, and countless memories with my son, countless hours like destroying pirate ships and rebuilding stuff. It's been really cool. And actually, from a creative side, I'd love to show you how we could maybe support you as a thanks. And ended up getting a really cool response, ended up having a really cool conversation and learning loads about how Lego put their creative projects together, and ended up getting our sales team in to speak to them as well at the same time. So for me, just having that like real personal thing that I could talk about just made it so much easier to get through the door. And I'll always kind of remember. Also, for the fact my manager bought me a giant Lego Star Wars kit at the time for as a well done, so I've still got that kicking around somewhere. So.
Amazing. Okay, on my end, this is cool because it's very recent, like yesterday. So at SendSpark, we've been working on rolling out this new feature that like I'm very excited about. As a founder, really easy to get excited about your own features, but you got to make sure other people are too. And the idea with this feature is you can create dynamic videos where you're bringing in your prospects like background or like their URL as the background of the video so that you can make super tailored content. And so last week I sent an email out to a sample group of 200 people that was like with a video. And it was like, hey, we have this new feature. We're looking for, the first 20 users to test it out. Here's how it works. I'm really excited about it. I got like 0 clicks, 0 replies, like nothing. And I'm like, oh my God, like rolling this out and working on it for months, like no one's interested. This is not good. And then this week I'm like, all right, well, that was just 200. Let me try again. And then I click like, all right, well, maybe instead of sending a demo of the feature, I should just show the feature in action and, put my camera bubble over their website. So I sent that out. I wrote the email Monday, sent it out yesterday, Tuesday. And then it was like our highest performing email. We had a 40% click-through rate, just to the 200, another 200 in the sample group. But that was like a nice win to be like, okay, like people do want to see their own website in the email. So it was good validation that the feature worked, and also cool that it was, pretty scalable, just a single email in the video.
I guess it catches their attention, right? If they see their own website in the background, like, oh, what's this?
Yeah. And then, so I think that was good. What I'm actually going to do for the next one today, before sending it out to the rest of the list, is try to show one of their customers' backgrounds and see if that performs better than their own website. Like, for example, like showing like your camera bubble over Legos or something. Be like, hey, imagine if you could be doing this for your prospects. I don't know if that'll perform better or worse than their own website, but we'll test it out. I can let you know.
It's worth A/B testing for sure, right? Yeah. And last but not least, over to you, Michael.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, before I give my story, Bethany, we've seen the same thing, sending videos, sharing screen on the website. You can say, hey, saw you're hiring this person based on the hiring page, or saw you've got a case study with this customer. That's kind of the way we do videos as well. So good to hear from a video expert you're doing that as well. My best cold outreach story is tactic anyone can use, actually. It's like a little bit using social selling and outbound. So when LinkedIn first released polls, it's before everyone started doing polls. There was a period a couple of years ago, people may remember, where like every third post on LinkedIn was a poll. But I found them very useful as like information gathering. So to do a poll related to like specific challenges. So I put a poll out saying, what's your biggest outbound sales challenge right now? There were 4 different answers, and one of them was relevant messaging. And as I was saying before, when you're outbounding someone, you're not sure what the pain point is. You kind of have to take a bit of a stab in the dark. If someone's gone on LinkedIn and filled out in a poll, hey, this is a challenge for me, it makes it much easier to contact them because that's a pain. So anyway, a CMO had said relevant messaging was a problem. She was managing an SDR team. And I just followed up saying, hey, I noticed relevant messaging is a problem for your SDR team. We got this guide on like writing better messaging on LinkedIn. An email, would you be interested in seeing it? She said yes. And then little tactic, a lot of SDRs will know is their phone number was in the signature. So I gave her a call and booked a meeting, and then they ended up becoming a customer. So yeah, that's a tactic I recommend is using LinkedIn polls because it's a good way of kind of like working out what are some of the challenges of your customers, and then you can outbound afterwards based on poll responses. So.
I guess it's also a way to kind of gauge how active and engaged your own audience is, right? Like, are they willing to go ahead and press that button? I know back in the day, everybody was just like voting on every single poll that came on their newsfeed. But now I think it's a testament just to see, is my audience really engaged? And if they are making that step to kind of vote or comment on that, then that potentially that's an avenue that you can pursue.
Yeah.
Awesome. Some phenomenal wins there. And that's all the questions that we had curated from our audience. And I just want to open it up to anyone who's listening, if they'd like to use the next couple of minutes that we have, just to check and bring up anything that's on their mind. And I believe we have one question already. So the question is, could you provide some insights on the percentage of time spent on cold calling compared to other outreach methods? Who wants to go first?
We don't do any cold calling. It's all email and LinkedIn and like marketing channels.
I think it depends like who you're targeting, because I think for some industries, cold calling is very like low pickup rates, and then for others, say you're calling sales leaders, often they pick up the phone more because they're expecting like a deal or a lead or something to come in. But if you're doing like a classic omni-channel approach, one of the things I recommend is, we always say with SDRs, or even if you're an AE trying to do a bit of outbound, like structure your day in a certain way. So if you're an SDR doing it full time, you may want 2 call blocks, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. And say you're targeting Europe and the US, you can do like the US call block in the afternoon. And then if you're like a full cycle salesperson who's just doing a bit of an outbound strategy, it may just be 1 hour a day or 1 hour every couple of days. But I think the key is like having those time blocks in. So that's what I would say. Anyone who wants to do cold calling is a tough thing, right? So you need to make sure it's in your diary, otherwise you'll just never get around to it, because you'll be like, oh, I'll do that later because that's the hard thing I need to do.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think just to add, the industries can make it more tough depending who picks up and who you're going after. I think also it's got harder naturally because since COVID and everyone went remote, a lot of companies have embraced a more remote world, and that means you can't just ring the desk at the HQ anymore and get through. So you get diminished results unless you have loads of mobile numbers, which are harder to obtain, and vendors have less of them than obviously like HQ numbers. So I think it's hard to kind of say an exact percentage, because I also think every rep is different. So one rep might have amazing results on using emails to broker an introduction. Some are just amazing at cold calling, and some are fantastic at LinkedIn and social selling. So I think it varies rep by rep, and you have to understand your own data of where you're being effective and kind of lean more into the channel that works best for you. In terms of how we work at Dealfront, we have kind of 2 outbound cadences that we use. The first one, that is the default one that you go to first, starts very heavily with phone calls. And the reason that we do that is it's typically the quickest way to get someone to say yes or no. If you get them on the phone, you're going to get an answer relatively quickly. But also, we might find at that point that phone is a modality that's just off the table. Like, we don't have a direct dial, we can't get through to them, they just never pick up, maybe because they don't recognize the number. And if that's the case, then we take them out of that and put them into a LinkedIn and email only one instead. And so we're not wasting our time on a modality that's off the table and we can't use. We just put them somewhere more valuable and use the channels that work for us.
Stuart, speaking of emails and how successful your own team has been, particularly over the last couple of months, would you be open to auditing some of the emails that our audience is sending?
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely.
Sorry to put you on the spot there.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah. Yes, if people want to send me an email, we can share my contact details now if you want. If people want to send me an email, let's say, I don't know, tomorrow or Friday, I'll kind of check every single one that comes through, and I can always provide my own feedback on it.
Perfect. Well, we have one more question from the audience. What advice would you give to someone who is starting with cold outreach? I think we touched base on this earlier on the call, but anything else that you'd like to add? Any, I guess, key takeaways? Or
I think the guy that's left now, he gave a good thing around, like, when he was at Chili Piper, because they were selling to marketing leaders, he used to listen to Chris Walker's podcast, which is like a marketing podcast, and then also around like the Gong story, he was reading Gong's content. So I think my takeaways from those success stories is, like, understand your audience. So for me, when you're first in the role, as well as trying to understand your product, as important, if not more important, is understand who are the people that I'm reaching out to. And that's like sign up to newsletters, sign up to listen to podcasts. So you want to try and get in the brain of your audience. Let's imagine you're selling to heads of HR. You should interview your head of HR, talk about her role, his or her role, internally, right? So that's what I would recommend, is trying to get in the head of the buyer persona that you're reaching out to.
Yeah. One tip I have to help you do that is start by really doing everything personally. Of course, when you have things up and running, it needs to be scalable, it needs to be efficient. But you'll notice if you write an email to the theoretical head of HR in your head, it looks one way. And then if you look at a real person like Sarah, and then you write an email to Sarah, it's going to be a completely different email. So just write out your first 10 emails super personally to just, real people, where you're just hey, I want to tell you about X. This is how we can help you. And then you'll find out okay, I'm starting to repeat myself. And that's when you go to automation. But if you try to write for your theoretical persona too soon, it can feel really jargony and automated and just overall not as personal as if you just start out by writing personal emails to people and then take it up a notch.
I would just say jump in the deep end. Just eat the frog with it. If you've got to eat a frog, eat it really quickly and get it over with. If you've got to eat two, eat the big ugly one first. I think with outbound, it can seem like this really big, scary thing. And it's really not. You are going to get rejected. You are going to mess stuff up. There is going to be times you fail, but it's just part of your journey. And that's the moments that you learn the most. So just embrace it, have fun with it. And I think, honestly, the quicker you start, the quicker you'll see results from it. So don't be afraid to just jump in, try stuff, fail fast, fail forward, and you'll start to see really quick results from it.
I know it's cliched, but the sooner you get outside of your comfort zone, the more likely you are to grow quicker, right?
100%.
Cool. Well, some great tips there. And I see there's no more questions from the audience. So in which case we can then conclude this webinar. So thank you all for hopping on the call today and imparting the audience with your knowledge and great tips. Before we say goodbye for now, I'd just like to ask you, what's the best avenue in terms of how people can approach you for questions or anything else that they might have on their mind?
I'd say LinkedIn as well. Welcome to email me as well as mhanson@growthgenie.co. It's .co, as we couldn't get the .com domain, unfortunately.
Same LinkedIn. Look up my name, Bethany Stackenfeld. I believe I'm the only one with it. So feel free to add me there and send me a message. And otherwise, you can email me. My email is just Bethany@sendspark.com. Send a video, spark a conversation. So either is fine, whatever you prefer.
Yeah, pretty much the same for me. So LinkedIn, there's about 1 million Stuart Mosses in the world, so I'm not special. But you'll find me on there, or stuart.moss@dealfront.com.
Well, thank you, Stuart, Michael, Bethany, and Elric for hopping on the call today. And for those tuning in, I shall catch you all on Dealfront's next webinar. Have a good
Thank
day.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.